Now, there's a bunch of news articles about this with a ton of fluff that I had to sift through, and I hope you appreciate that, because, it's kind of a sensational, clickbaity kind of thing we got going on here, but I really wanted to preserve my own sanity and integrity, and give you actual proper information about the subject, rather than just, oh my god, look! This happened! Oh, quick, look at it! Now, I want you to look at the video, but I also want you to be informed. So, what happened here? How in the world did a train run into a plane? Was the plane on a truck? Did the train jump the tracks at an airport? Did the train sprout wings and fly? We've already talked about trains getting in weird places. Maybe it did that. No, that's not what happened at all. Before we get into the details of the incident, let's discuss the vehicles involved. The train is actually a Rotom commuter car, specifically a cab car. And this particular model was running for Metrolink. Metrolink is a passenger service that runs over in California. I've actually heard very good things. I've never been out there myself, but apparently the Metrolink lines are actually quite enjoyable to ride on. They're modern, public transit is great. For overall, I hear many, many good stories about Metrolink in general for the most part, so that's good. The cab car in question was manufactured by Hyundai Rotom. Yes, the car manufacturer Hyundai. This is a subsidiary of them. And as far as I'm able to tell, these are pretty decent locomotives. And by tell, I mean there's surprisingly lack of information beyond like a press release over all the features. So that tells me that if there's not much to be said, they must be doing a good job. That's usually what happens with modern trains. If you hear nothing about them, and they're running, that means they're good. That means they're great. They're doing phenomenal. Because otherwise, everyone would be all over that if the train was causing issues. But from what I can tell, these cab cars are actually pretty decent at what they're designed to do. They're actually sold in sets along with the other cars because they're actually set up in a bi-level system where there's actually 2 floors within the train itself. This goes for the entire set, and the cab car is just that. The engineer actually occupies the same space as some of the passengers. It's set up kind of like a subway would be. Subways generally have this layout too, where there's a cab car that, controls the train, but passengers are also in it. This is designed to use as much space as possible to encourage, the most passengers you could put in the train. It works for a commuter service like this, especially in a large city like the LA area. Now, the plane has a lot more information about it because the plane was a Cessna 172H. You have probably seen pictures or actually seen Cessnas. The 172 model was first flown in 1955, and the first production model entered service in 1956. The Cessna 172 is quite literally the most popular plane in the history of aircraft. This is for a variety of reasons. For one thing, they're kind of an amalgamation of everything that we learned about aircraft in the early 20th century. They're mono-wing, single-prop, very basic planes. But that's their biggest strength, because they're efficient, they're safe, they're comfortable, and they're affordable. Not only do many militaries use them for scouting in some places, but police forces use them, geological surveyors use them, and recreational flyers use them. Maybe some of you have that well-off uncle who, in his spare time, learned to fly a plane just for funsies. He may actually own a Cessna, because they are so popular. They're easy to maintain, they're reliable, they're easy to fly, they are phenomenal for what they're built for. In fact, they're so good and so popular that even though the first production models came out in 1956, they are still produced, manufactured to this day. Now, of course, they have a ton of different models and upgrades since then, but still, that's longevity for a plane of this type. It also is the holder of a world record, believe it or not. The record was set for refuel flight endurance. The pilot and co-pilot, which took turns, were Robert Tim and John Cook. They flew the plane, only landing to refuel, and probably be given food and water, for 64 days, 22 hours, 19 minutes, and 5 seconds. And, look, I can't drive my car for more than 12 hours tops before I had enough. These dudes flew this plane for almost 65 days. That's over 2 months. Holy crap. But I digress, because the reason you're watching this video isn't for the backstory on the vehicles involved. You want to know how this train hit this plane. Alright, the incident in question occurred on January 8th this year. Yeah, just last week. Well, maybe closer to 2 weeks ago. Very recently. But like I said, this is still history. It's still in the past, so I can still talk about it. You can't yell at me. The pilot was Mark Jenkins, who's a former Air Force pilot and 70 years old. So, older dude, flying a plane as a hobbyist. I mean, he flew in the Air Force, so I can imagine he would want to, relive his glory days flying a Cessna around. No harm in that. What is more harmful is the Cessna in question decided that that day was a really good day to suffer engine failure. The investigation's still out exactly what caused the failure. I haven't been able to determine why it happened, probably because there's not much of the plane left to examine, though Mr. Jenkins insists that he always did the pre-flight checks on the plane and maintained it very well, so it could have been anything. I mean, these Cessnas are popular and reliable, but that doesn't mean things can't happen. I mean, my father maintains his truck really well. The battery died last week, just randomly, because, things happen, is the point. But the engine failed in mid-flight. So, Jenkins had to make an emergency landing. And one of the things that differentiates planes from cars and trains when it comes to accidents, or in this case an emergency landing, is that planes can generally wind up basically anywhere. I mean, a car's usually restricted to a road. So, when a car wrecks, it'll be near the road. Same with a train. I mean, a train's always going to be in the track. And if it's not on the track, then that's not good, but it shouldn't have gone too far from the track. It's pretty rare for things to just vanish from a train track. And planes have charted courses, so you can usually gauge pretty well where they're going to end up if something does go wrong. But at the end of the day, because they fly, a plane, depending on the model and the altitude it can fly at, can wind up anywhere from Mount Kilimanjaro to your backyard. The reason I bring this up is how alarming it is to me that of all the places, of all the spots that this plane could have decided to come down at, oh boy, train tracks. Really? You couldn't pick anywhere else? But I don't want to come down on Mark too hard on this, because first of all, he didn't have a lot of options. The engine had failed. He had to bring it down. And the longer he waited, the more likely the crash was going to be a lot more catastrophic. In addition, the reason he chose the tracks was because it was the only clear spot in the area that he could get to. Otherwise, he'd be landing on a road and he might have hurt somebody on the ground. So, from that perspective, I totally understand why a train track might seem a lot more reasonable when compared to a busy highway. He likely figured he could bring it down and get out before anything terrible happened. What he didn't count on was, first of all, being pretty badly injured in the crash itself. He suffered multiple broken bones, so he couldn't exactly move very well. The plane was also pretty damaged, so getting him out was incredibly difficult. It was fortunate that several LAPD officers were nearby, saw him come down, and came to assist. Now, the original plan here was to wait for more emergency personnel to arrive to bring him out safely, because whenever someone suffers trauma in any kind of accident, you never necessarily want to move them immediately if you can help it. Especially if that broken bone happens to be, say, the neck or the spine. It's very easy to do more damage to the person just by moving them. It's best to wait for EMS to arrive and get them on a gurney just to be safe. The officers were treating Jenkins' injuries best they could and notifying Metrolink to halt the trains because, they knew that a train could come. Except as soon as they got on the phone with Metrolink, horns started blaring. Yep, the train was already headed down the line at 80 miles an hour, with the plane and Mark Jenkins still on the tracks. The officers didn't have a lot of choices now. If they left him, well, he was guaranteed to be dead. When a train hits something, that thing is getting obliterated. This is a rule, a good rule to follow. Unless the vehicle you happen to be inhabiting is an M1 Abrams, anything else is not gonna have a good day when a train hits it. And to be honest, I'm still on the fence how well an M9 would be able to hold up from an oncoming train. Trains are unique in that they combine the two terrible traits of impact ratio, weight and speed. A train can be hauling thousands of tons of stuff and still be traveling at 120 miles per hour. So any kind of impact is going to be bad for whatever's on the receiving end, regardless of what it is. And in this case, it was a damaged Cessna and a 70-year-old man with broken bones. They were not going to win this battle. The officers, to their credit, totally threw caution to the wind and leapt into action. With little choice, they pried Mark Jenkins from the Cessna and carried him off the tracks, quite literally 5 seconds before the train plowed into the plane. I think think the footage speaks for itself here. You can clearly see the kind of power we're talking about. Had Mark been left inside that plane, there's no way he would have survived. The train, on the other hand, got off with minor superficial damage. After all, it was just a Cessna. Because of the actions of the LAPD, Mark Jenkins has survived, and all sources say he's currently recovering at the hospital and is in stable condition. Which can't be said about his plane, but hey, I mean, this dude had a really bad day. He suffered engine failure and had to make the emergency landing, which injured him quite badly. And the emergency landing wound up on the train tracks, with a speeding train headed straight towards him. And in that regard, this story is very weird, because he survived, and is probably going to make a full recovery. So he's like both the unluckiest and luckiest man I've seen in a long time. But hey, good for him, I'm glad he's okay. And special thanks to the officers who did their jobs that day. It's not every day you see people work up the nerve to run headlong in front of a speeding train to save somebody else, and that is what officers are supposed to do. So props where it's deserved. Till next time, this is Darkness, and I bid you all a fond farewell.